Hey Matt and everyone that's all the YouTubers. I just now got to this video. I think I'd only watched part of it before, and I'd like to hear more about Lacan from you, Matt, because I don't have time to read Lacan, and I know that Merleau-Ponty was good friends with Lacan, and whenever I'm reading through the visible and the invisible, I'll see him talk about the symbolic matrix and things like this, and I'm interested in how in Merleau-Ponty's ideas from the structure of behavior, where he concentrated so much on the symbolic function and was so obviously so influenced by Ernest Cassirer. Then he dropped off with that in the Phenomenology perception, and then Invisible and the Invisible. Well, my channel name is Emblem of Being, which is just another way of his referring to uh, this idea of the symbolic function, which supposedly from Merleau-Ponty is one of the huge separators between between humans and animals. Anyway, I better get to this because I wrote a pretty long I wrote a pretty long document in Notepad here, just about some things, like a question I wanted to ask you, and then a little thing I wanted to talk about on Plato's idea of participation. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm not going to follow the text exactly, but I'm going to I'm gonna improvise here and there. So, but what it should be pretty coherent and should help me stay on track. The question I guess that I wrote out first here was how would you weave or blend? And I'm using weave and blend because those are the metaphors that it's the language that Plato uses so often. But how would you weave or blend a kind of ecologically oriented view, which is close to what Professor Anton seems, he works that into his into his philosophy. So how would you weave or blend an ecologically oriented view with something like Plato's theory of ideas? And I mean this, a biological or ecological oriented view. It does not usually admit of the reality of Platonic ideas, such as justice and the nexus of ideas of which it is constituted, justice. So I mean, reason, appetite, spirit, um, and all of those three are point to the deeper account of eros and its place in human motivation. Um, and then we can't talk about justice unless we want to talk about. I mean, you couldn't do a full account of justice. Plato couldn't without talking about truth and some sense of the overall good that's at stake here when a complex, multifaceted issue like justice is brought forth in discussion. So far, the point is that you know biological ecological view doesn't usually admit of something like, I mean, it's a kind of an outdated idea, right? The reality of Platonic ideas, like as justice being a real idea, something in like the realm of the forms, which is one interpretation of Plato. Um, and so justice is connected to all these other ideas. We can't consider them without all the ones I just mentioned. We can't consider it fully. And also at the same time, justice is a part of other the larger scheme of things, which the good, most notably, and it participates in that. So it ideas participate in other ideas, and so they have these essential interrelations, right? Um, so how would we account for something like justice, or all the other ideas I just mentioned, with an ecologically oriented view, as the video that I'm replying to, um, like in Professor Anton's conception? There seems to be a gap between a you know, uh, Plato's theory of forms and an ecological or a biological existential view. I mean, they do clash. So how would we weave or blend these together? Um, Another example would be Evan Thompson's Inactivism in Mind and Life. And I know you've been thinking about that work, especially in relation to Whitehead. So how would you do that? That's what I want to know, and I'm going to keep going here. So Anton makes a few points in your quotation of his book, and two of which are something like um, that the world and the self are not something already accomplished, one, and two, that the lived body is a concerning being with being toward. Uh, Now, as I see it, these are ways of expressing the same phenomena which basically force the recognition of the ideas upon Plato. In our better moments, we always seem to look to the good in bringing forth a particular situation when resolutions to conflict recommend themselves as reasonable, where the parties involved are able to come to a shared sense of what is best for this particular case, and not by applying a rule selected from some hidden deck or stack we keep stored somewhere in our minds for certain situations. But uh, this the looking to the good, just uh, instead of saying that we employ some rule or whatever, we just have this very general idea of looking to the good, and it seems to be this. It seems to recommend particular pretty creative solutions for all different types of situations in which we can get a shared sense of, oh, this is a reasonable solution to a problem. Not always possible, but a lot of times, it is at least possible. So, you know, so the point is that those two quotes by Professor Anton from your book about how the world and the self are not something accomplished when we're constantly striving towards something, and the lived body is a concerned or concerning being with being toward, uh, and it's just that fact, those two sorts of facts that I think Plato said, hey, how is it that we all have this idea of, or these ideas of justice, which is different from any particular instance or of justice. But we all know it when we see it. We know the more just from the less just, et cetera, et cetera. So Professor Anton brings up a lot of issues, such as society and responsibility and human nature, and I'm sure others. But even those three I've just mentioned, they link up to others, such as, goodness, truth, education, spirit, appetite, reason, justice, virtue, beauty, and these, what we could think of as discrete ideas, are in reality, the way that Plato makes it seem, that these are all in reality like the fabric of ideas. They're essentially a nexus, if you want to use a Whiteheadian friendly term, a nexus of intelligible relationships. So a single idea by itself is not knowledge. So now I'm just talking about the ideas, as you can see. But so a single idea by itself is not knowledge, and this was shown in Parmenides, and that's really the young Socrates' source of error there. And in addition to the impossibility for the historical Parmenides to think being and only being without reference to non-being or what is other than being. Anyway, also related to Anton, but the point is that the young Socrates had to come to this realization that no single idea, in the with a capital I, by itself, um, is is knowledge, um, qualifies as knowledge. And anyway, the point is that in any insight, an entire nexus or intertwining of ideas is brought into play. And this is just what thinking is. And this is how I think we should maybe think about this in coming to some sort of agreement about the original question that I had posed before. Um, so this is just what thinking is to enter into this historical web or nexus of ideas, which, at least phenomenologically and experientially, even you could say ontologically and logically, these ideas are very real. They're the most real things in our lives, you might say. And everyone agrees that friendship is something, and we can easily do, before we get really like critical about it, when someone just asks us a question, and every day we say, yeah, friendship, yeah, and we can make judgments about, so and so's relationship is uh, a better friendship than so and so's, than these two people's, um, and we can have like a high degree of agreement about these things. So friendship it does in a sense exist. It does definitely. Before you get critical about it, it's a real phenomenon that I think can be naturalized if we understand naturalize in a proper manner. But look to the next video.